Hello, my name is Danny Krasnick. You are listening to 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair, and this is Movies Till Midnight. And I'm here with a very special guest, a director who recently broke into my top 10 most watched on Letterboxd. I kid you not.
Oh, no way.
I am not
That's
kidding. I
wild.
wish I was kidding. Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself to the listening audience?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dylan Clark. I am a filmmaker, writer, director. I mainly do horror stuff, and I've been uploading my stuff to YouTube for a while, and a little bit more recently, I've been able to find an audience there. And yeah, I guess Daniel's one of those audience members, which is really cool.
I
So,
am. I am. It's a basic question, but how'd you get started doing film stuff?
yeah, it's kind of funny because I started making short films when my family was living overseas. We were in Germany at the time, and I was like 9 years old, and I was making like superhero short films. But I wasn't really watching new movies at the time, so I'm not exactly sure like what specific thing kickstarted it for me. But um, but I just decided to pick up a camera and start making these action superhero movies that were terrible. Of course, terrible. But then I was really into comic books actually, so that's probably, there's a similarity. They're kind of like storyboards reading comic books. So maybe that was kind of the origin of all of it. But then when we came back to the States, I started making horror stuff because I saw that I saw the Blair Witch Project in particular, and I thought, oh my God, my superhero films look like the Blair Witch Project, like they look terrible. And in this movie, that isn't a problem. The fact that it looks like this is actually on purpose. So I started making short films in the woods with friends with the camcorder, kind of leaning into that and falling in love with the genre independently of the filmmaking. And so kind of just nurturing both a love for movies and the horror genre as a viewer as well as filmmaker tangentially, and then seeing filmmakers on YouTube starting to have a lot of success with these like really short contained films and getting inspired by that and continuing to put stuff on YouTube. And yeah, that's pretty much been it. Just years of
Yeah.
that now.
Yeah. So with your movies, you said you write and direct. Do you do what else do you do for your sets, or is it just writing and directing?
Well, because the sets are so small, usually for a lot of the stuff on my channel is like really small. And usually I'll like shoot those and kind of wear a ton of hats on set. But more recently, especially now that we're kind of, out of the COVID world, um, I've been able to focus on writing and directing as like the things I want to do and the things that I can put my time into with a bigger crew. But typically I'll still edit. Editing is the thing that the other pillar I feel like I really want to like preserve with my work if I can.
Yeah,
So
and I feel like with a lot of your stuff, the editing drives a lot of the horror, honestly.
yeah,
Which
yeah,
leads to the
yeah.
next question. Have you ever scared yourself while you're watching your movies back?
My own movies?
Like, yeah,
No.
like when you're editing, is there ever like, ooh,
I mean, not really. I sometimes I'll when I know something's working, I'll be able to sit back and watch it through and I'll feel a sense of satisfaction. Well, I mean that sounds very like obvious, but like a certain moment I'll be like there can be like a visceral reaction. It may not be like if it's a jump scare, for instance, I may not jump, but I might feel like the slightest amount of like
yeah.
tension. And I'm like, okay, I think it's working. So maybe on like a micro level, I can feel something, but not really.
Yeah,
So
so I want to talk about your last film that came out a few months ago, Remains, but I just rewatched
yeah.
it last night.
Oh
Jeez,
yeah.
man. Like, come on, man. Like, you're putting us all to shame.
Oh,
Like,
thanks. Well,
geez.
did you get
No,
jumped?
I didn't get jumped, but like the part where I mean it's been out for a while, so I can talk
Yeah,
specifically.
yeah,
But the part where the creature just goes like the like geez,
yeah.
actual just dread. Just.
Thanks. Thank you.
But yeah, that came out after, and your one before that was arguably your most successful, and in my
Yeah.
opinion, it's my favorite, which was Portrait of God, which, you know, to be completely honest, probably one of the best short films I have seen, just in
Oh,
general,
thank you.
hands down.
Thanks so much.
Fantastic movie. So, what did you have anything from Portrait of God that you carried over into Remains, like any crew things or technical things that you were like, oh, this works, let's carry that over? Was there anything you wanted to do in Portrait of God that you were like, oh, let's just carry that into the next movie that maybe you
Mhm.
weren't able to do? Like, walk me through that
Um,
a bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's always things that like the thing you're working on currently feels only possible by the things that you succeeded or failed with on your former thing. I'm trying to remember what they were going from Portrait of God to Remains. I know one of them, one of the issues we had with Portrait of God was it was so scrappy that like it was me and the AC and AD, we were like doubling up on a bunch of roles. And one of the things we worked on together was like the very it doesn't come across on screen very well, but like we did a lot of makeup to the hand that comes out of the dark.
Mhm.
And that hand, we really wanted to like do a lot more with it. And with the time and budget we had, we didn't do as much with it. And so for Remains, I was like, okay, we definitely are getting a makeup artist, and we're definitely having her spend a lot of time on the hands.
Mhm.
So that was like one
No,
thing, but I'm
it's
trying
very
to,
noticeable.
yeah, I mean, the hands are like a
Yeah,
character in Remains pretty much because they're
yeah.
all over the place. But I'm trying to think of like a bigger thing because that's a very specific thing. I mean, similar crew members for sure.
Mhm.
Um, and you kind of get in a groove working with them multiple times. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess
And I
that's
think I
probably
think
it.
that's what's so impressive about your stuff. Like I've watched some of your behind the scenes stuff, and it's like you have such a small crew in like one location, and somehow you're
It's
able to
very
make something that
quaint.
looks, yeah, but it looks so professionally. It's so
Thank you.
professionally done. You know,
Thanks.
like it looks great. Like I don't know what I don't know what y'all do over there, but
I
uh,
think I think a big part of it is like restricting your canvas. Like so much of Portrait of God is just black. Like the whole frame is just
yeah.
black. So it's like, well, we can't make this whole room look good. But you know, if we just shine a light up at her, that's striking.
Yeah.
And have just one light in the background. So it's really just stripping back.
Mhm.
Um, I like to think that's the secret sauce, perhaps. But yeah. But thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned something about your budget when it came to Portrait of God.
Mhm.
So, as and I'm dealing with this right now with my own stuff.
Mhm.
One of the most difficult things for a younger filmmaker is finding the budget and, but everything economics
Yeah.
wise.
Yeah.
So my question to you is what is the pitch for something like Remains? Like how do you pitch this
Hmm.
to people?
Well, Remains was like that was crowd slash self-funded, so I didn't really have to pitch. I mean, I did pitch. Remains was my thesis film for school, so that was actually um something I pitched, but it wasn't for like money's sake. It was just for like I'm gonna do this. Here's the pitch. But in terms of pitching for a budget, because I just shot something a couple weeks ago. That was the first thing that like I got a good amount of money from uh like an investor from a separate production company to make the short. And so
Wake up, new
that
Dylan Clark movie about to drop.
yeah, exclusive. No, but like I pitched to them the idea and that was like a proper, that process basically. And I think it just comes down to well, I guess your question was about Remains because that's a hard thing to pitch. And I think there's a lot of shorts, especially the horror shorts, that are like, I can't imagine how this pitch would have gone.
Think with a lot of your things too is it's like it's so and it comes across extremely well the way you produce it, but it's like I can't imagine if you just told me like someone sees a face in a painting that's not there, or
Yeah.
there's a mysterious figure with antlers chasing them through a dream, maybe question mark. Like
Yeah.
it's like I like, and obviously you guys do a great job with it, but I don't like how do you tell
Sell
someone this is
that.
what you're doing and how do you make it
Yeah.
as cool as it ends up being?
I mean, it's very different from how you show a film to someone, like how you tell a film to someone to get them interested, especially when it comes down to money, is it's like it can sometimes spoil the film a bit. And I think like Portrait of God and like Rest, the Antlers one, um, I would probably pitch Rest as like a boy thinks he's dreaming uh, and is trying to escape, but actually it's hell. So his attempts to kill himself to wake up are, endlessly torturing him. Like you would kind of get right into the meat of it, as opposed to the short, which like really only works if you have that slow burn, like for the first,
Yeah.
two-thirds. So you can't really pitch the way that you show a film most of the time. You really got to get right into the hook. Or like with Portrait of God, I think it's you don't really pitch the film itself, you pitch the painting. Like the painting is the interesting part. and then pitch the film around it after that. Because if you pitch like a girl is doing a class project and like that gets a little bit less interesting. But if you go
Yeah.
right into the meat of it, if you have a good hook, then that can usually do it. It's
Yeah.
tricky though. It's really hard. I mean, some of my favorite shorts, I'm like, I cannot imagine how they
Yeah.
pitch that because they're very
Yeah.
atmospheric.
And I feel like
So
especially for a horror film, I would imagine where it's like
yeah,
it's mostly like not the gimmick, that's not the right word, but it's like this is the scary thing,
yeah,
like scary painting that's not supposed to have anything there, you know?
yeah,
Like I feel like that's harder to pitch and visualize as opposed to like someone wakes up one day and goes to class and blah blah
yeah,
blah, you know,
yeah,
or
exactly.
yeah,
Well,
like
it's funny. I forgot about this until we were us talking about it now, but the actress in it, Sydney, who's a friend of mine, I remember telling her like, "Oh, I want to do a project with you. I don't know what it is yet." And then I was gonna pitch her the project, and what I did was this is like slightly maniacal, which I totally forgot about, but I had her come into the room we were going to shoot it in, which was a very similar room. Like it had the dark curtains and everything. It was just a little bit bigger and I hooked up my computer to the projector and I like had the image for the painting and I had like a thing where it would just slowly appear over time looking at the projector and I was like okay like here's the setup there's this painting and when people look at it like you know I gave her the spiel and
yeah,
then I like had it slowly appear on the screen and on the screen and we're in this dark room together alone with one other person actually but it was very unsettling and I
awesome.
think it was yeah it's I'm surprised I forgot about this because that was probably a good way to do it like if you can really immerse them in the experience uh again using the hook then that's a good way to do it I think
Yeah.
so
Man, Portrait of God was so good. Anyway,
thank you
I'm
once
trying to
again.
I'm trying to talk about your more recent stuff. That was pretty recent.
Oh,
Um,
it's all good.
but speaking of which, your earlier films also great. 1105, Pretty
Thank
Things,
you.
all your earlier stuff. Big fan. Again, in my top
Thanks.
10 most watched directors.
That's insane.
Somehow. And I think you're my top watched director for the year currently. Also,
Oh, nice.
um,
Damn, I'll
uh,
take it.
so far. So comparing your earlier films to your newer stuff, obviously, you know, it's been several years since that earlier stuff. How do you think your earlier stuff holds up? Like, do you think there's anything, you know,
I
I mean,
don't.
obviously, the production value obviously has gone up as you've, you know, matured as a filmmaker and everything like that. But, you know,
Mhm.
do you think there's anything about those earlier ones that you think maybe even is better than your newer stuff? Is there anything where it's like, oh, this is a vibe
Mm.
we got with this earlier stuff that you know, we were able to get with a lower budget and stuff like that, but now since we have a higher budget, it's harder to do that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I like, well, it's weird. You cross the threshold, like when it's within a couple years of you having done something, it's like unbearable to watch it because
Yeah.
it feels like it ages. But once you pass the threshold of a couple years or whenever it feels old enough that you can watch it again, it's like, oh, that's cute. So I'm starting to get that way about some of the older films, but 1105 I think is an example of like a concept that we just I mean it's very simple as well, but we just went for that without thinking about you know doing it masterfully or perfectly on the budget we had. We were just like, here's what we got, here's a story we can kind of do, let's just go for it. And that mentality kind of drains as you start to hold yourself to a production value and budget standard. You know, once you do something at a certain quote unquote level, it's a mental battle to be okay with doing something that feels more amateur. As silly as that sounds, I don't know if we would have I don't know if I would have had the courage to do 1105 now because I would feel like I couldn't pull it off at the level I would want to. But it's kind of a shame in some cases because I think there's this like indie sensibility to just get something done that is good in a lot of ways, and we had it back then because we weren't as focused on certain things. So that's something that I think maybe now I've lost a little bit, but hopefully it's still there. Yeah,
Hmm. Interesting. So walk me through the process of coming up with, we'll use Remains as an example, right? Because that's
sure.
your newest one. How, when you're coming up with the ideas for your films, is it what comes first? Is it location first? Is it, do you come up with the story of what do you want to have happen? Do you come up with the design of, you know, whatever monster or creature is in the film? Because again, all most of your movies have some sort of, you know,
Cool.
creature from hell
Yeah, yeah.
appearing, you know. So just like what comes first? What's the first start? What's the first step?
I mean, Remains is a weird example because it was like this whole other project before and had like a last minute switch up because of a COVID infection and all sorts of stuff.
Oh
So
wow.
I may actually use Portrait of God
Sure, use
because
part of God
that
then.
was
Why not?
like one that was more the normal process, but and that's a good example because that started with I know I had Sydney. I knew that we had this classroom and I knew we had this projector and the things that are in the classroom to use um, throughout the film. And and I knew we didn't have a lot of time because we wanted to film it in the certain time period and there was other stuff going on. And so basically all these limitations kind of forced the location to be what it was in a good way. It made it so that there were only a couple of options that I had to get something done with the limitations. And so it became okay, well, we have this room. Let's figure out what film we can make around this room. So location first. And then it was we have one actor. What can we do around one actor? And then it became you know, there's dark curtains in this room. What's a scare mechanic that could work in a room that is just dark everywhere, except these like very particular places? And that's when I started to think about how scary I find it in films when you can just barely see something standing in the dark. Um, and so it became trying to come up with something around that scare mechanic. And so then it was the painting, and then it's like, how do you exposit for a painting? She's doing a presentation. So it's this weird like waterfall of like, how do I get from here to here to here to here? It's almost like the flow of a conversation where when you trace it back, um, it makes sense, but when you look at it from above, it's like, how do we go from talking about movies to talking about like the tides of the ocean? But then when you trace the conversation, it makes a lot of sense. And I think coming up with a movie is similar, where like the trickle of ideas can feel really abstract until you put it all together, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, but that's kind of where it came from. And trying to think of other, I mean, the religious side of it definitely came from, well, how can we add something on top of all of that? Because those are all the limitations. This is like, I knew I had the horror film, but I didn't know like what the thing was that could make it like stick around longer. And I think that's where you can map on your themes or whatever deeper meaning. And some people like to start with theme, um, and that can be interesting. But I think uh, sometimes you'll find your theme and it's a more natural fit if you find it after kind of playing with the other things. And in that case, it was a theme after. So yeah, that's kind of how that went. That's typically how it is for these small things.
Mhm. And yeah, so we talked about you getting into horror from a young age or anything like that. What is it about like the horror where there's just like again, like we said earlier, just these demonic creatures, just what is it about that kind of horror as opposed to like because again, especially for younger student filmmakers, like there's a lot
Mhm.
easier things you could do. Like you could have just someone running
Yeah.
around with a knife killing people. You could have you know
Mhm.
other things are escaping me at the moment. Just a found footage thing, like just
Yeah.
people lost in the woods, like a Blair Witch kind of thing. So like, what is it about you know making it based around these weird? I don't
Ghouls.
even know what else to describe them as. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what I'm trying to get at. Like, what is it
Yeah.
about doing films based around that that's so compelling? I guess to you as a filmmaker or to the audience, however
Yeah.
way you choose to answer that.
Yeah. No, I think it is interesting. I think for me, I find horror movies that build up the appearance of this one thing. Yeah, I mean, classic like monster movie, like, oh, we're gonna see the shark at some point, but the first half of the movie, we're just hoping we'll catch a glimpse of it. And there's like, you look at a shot of just deep water and it's terrifying because we know this is a movie where we're probably gonna see something at some point. So you can look at a Blair Witch, and I love the Blair Witch Project, and I'd be happy to make a movie like the Blair Witch Project. But I do think there's something fun as a filmmaker to be like, well, how could we show just something? Like Blair Witch shouldn't show the witch. That's how that movie should be. But for like my own stuff, I like to get a little more like I love Del Toro's stuff and the way he shows his creatures and um
Tokyo.
Yeah, and Pinocchio. I love Pinocchio in particular. I do love Pinocchio, but I do think the anticipation of seeing something is really fun. But then if you do show it a little bit, you can kind of get out there and get trippy and as a filmmaker play a little bit. And so I like to mix the two where it's like, yes, there is this, in Portrait of God, it's like, yes, there is this thing in this painting, and I'm going to really build up the idea that you are going to see it. That's even like central to the core premise. And then I do kind of want to give you that a little bit, but it's out of focus, or something like that. You give them just enough so that they don't feel like they're ripped off and like every project is the Blair Witch Project, um, but but not so much that they don't feel like the grandeur of this thing slowly appearing is lost. Um, yeah. So I don't know. I like seeing creatures. I just they have to be done well, and I really like the anticipation of waiting to see a creature. So that's typically the archetype I think I play
Yeah,
with.
I think you do a great job. I mean, all of the effects in your stuff is just like I spend a lot of
Thank
time when I'm
you.
watching it trying to figure out like how the what?
Oh, I love that.
And then I watch the BTS. I'm like, oh, okay. All right.
See, it's ruining the
He
surprise.
used Photoshop. I see.
See,
I
that's
knew
why I'm
his
like,
mouth
maybe I
couldn't
shouldn't
open
do
that
it.
wide.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's all fake. I promise you.
Uh, Darn, I thought you just had these creatures like it's in a
No,
basement somewhere.
I love that. There's some shorts, some horror shorts that don't do their BTS stuff, and I will like analyze frame by frame. I'm like, is that a puppet? Like, is that VFX? Like, how are they doing that?
Yeah.
And some of them I still can't figure it out, and it drives me nuts. And then it's usually really simple, and that's like the kind of like what
Doesn't take
makes it
that long.
special. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
No, like literally, like
anyways.
I watched when I first watched Portrait of God, I was like, what? Oh, huh? And then I was like, how on earth? And then I watched the BTS, I'm like, oh, ah. I
It's
was like,
just
darn.
me
Yeah, yeah, I liked
stalking around.
the non VFX edited shot, which is it's just you with the mask on.
Oh man, it looks so goofy. That's why I can't scare myself no matter how
It's your
far
Hitchcock. It's your Hitchcock.
I guess it
Good
is
director
cursed.
cameo.
My cursed Hitchcock
Yeah.
cameo.
So of all of your your fantastic beasts and where to find them, is there any is there any one of them that you're the most proud of how it turned out? And are there any that your like earlier films that you're like now that I'm, a little bit older that I think I would be able to do this a little bit differently or a little bit better to get a better product. Again, I think all of your stuff holds up really well, but as you as a filmmaker,
Thanks.
was there any stuff that you were like, I wasn't able to do this back then, but now I know how to do stuff?
Yeah, I mean like pretty much all my older stuff has things about it, like pivotal things about them that that I would do so differently now. But but I think the project that it's difficult because people definitely resonate with Portrait of God the most, and that's awesome. And I like that short. But upon completing Portrait of God, I was like, oh man, this sucks. Like I really like did
Oh,
not think, but
oh,
well, it's tricky. I mean, you got to like see it through and release it because you can be totally wrong about these things, and obviously you have to trust your gut that you made it for a reason. But but now I look at Portrait of God and I am proud of it, but I'm trying to make sure that's not only because of other people like it. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
if these films existed in a vacuum, I'm curious what my opinions of all of them would be. But but I think because it doesn't, Portrait of God is probably the one I'm most proud of because that was the most through and through script to screen. This is exactly what I want. We pulled it off and it
Mhm.
resonates with people. So yeah, that's probably the one.
So that actually kind of leads into two questions. So I got to figure out which one I wanted to ask next. Uh, so, take aside Remains because that's your new one. That one just came
Mm,
out. Take aside Portrait of God because that's the big one, that,
mm.
it's the most successful and everything like that. Which is your favorite of your movies, if you have one? Do you play
Ooh.
favorites with your with your own movies?
Yeah, I think I do. Because usually when I watch them, I'm like, oh, if I can enjoy that at the very least now, then I know I actually like it. Um, oh, taking aside those two,
Yeah,
I'm
take
like,
take
what have I
your time.
done?
I
Um,
can pull it up. I can pull up your list.
the two I do like, I like home movies, um, and I like Transfigure. Transfigure's a little goofy, but I like it. I think home movies I'm proud of along with Portrait of God for particular reasons. And for home movies, we just did the short. Oh, okay. If there's like the one short I really don't like is Behind the Frame. I abhor that short. And
That was one of the
there's so
early
many.
ones.
Well, it's not
That's
as
funny.
early as I would like
Oh,
for what it is, but it's one of those things where
I gotta pull up the.
because
I gotta go to Letterboxd.
yeah. I shot both of those home movies, actually all three of those during like, lockdown COVID time frame, or pretty much around that time. And so I shot them all with my sister as like the star because we were just stuck at home together.
Mhm.
And Behind the Frame, we both hated. Like we thought it was okay when we finished it, and then like literally a couple months later, we both turned hardcore on it, and we were like, okay, we got to make something that like rectifies all the problems with that
Jeez.
film. And Home Movies was like directly like beats in that film are specifically there because they like directly contradict something
Yeah.
in Behind the Frame that we didn't like. And we thought we pulled it off. Like we were both really happy with how that film turned out. And then Transfigure was just like fun.
Mhm.
So I enjoy watching that one. It's so
Is
short and
is
goofy.
Behind the Frame one that you think like your problems with it? Is it like from a technical standpoint, or is it like a story like is it one that you can see yourself like if you did it again now, is it something you'd be more proud of, or was it just like
Yeah,
a story thing where it's like, no, it's just flawed to the core. I can't do anything about this.
it's flawed to the core, but I think I like the central hook could have totally worked as a better short. Like I would maybe happily like wipe that from existence and use that hook again because I do think you can have a lot of fun with like the whole pictures thing. And I think for the most part technically like it's fine. Um it looks a little weird, but I think that it's like way too long for what it is. Respectfully to my sister, we both agree on this, and she like in Transfigure and Home Movies, she like nailed it. But we were trying to figure out like how to work together there. So the character is just kind of weird on like an acting and character level. It's like these very specific things that I think are critical problems with it, and could be fixed if done again. But I yeah, I can't touch it. It's in the
It's gone.
past. It's a
Yeah.
bleak time, but yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you, my three we'll call it the three underrated ones. Well,
Okay.
I like Rest. I like Rest a
Yeah.
lot. I
Oh,
like
awesome.
Movies. I like Home
Yeah.
Movies a lot. And I like the one with the eggs.
Oh my
I like the one with the
God.
eggs. Tell me
That's
about the
so
one with the
funny.
eggs.
I'm sure that
Tell me behind the scenes lore about the eggs.
so that was also like a COVID hell film where it was supposed to be a cinematography. Well, it was a couple of things. I was taking this like 3D design course, which was literally like 3 days of just like learning how to design something. And it was hard. I was not good at it. And I was like, okay, well, what can I use this for? And I was stuck otherwise in my apartment with my roommate, who's not an actor, who's not even a film person. And I was like, I have this
That's the best
idea.
kind of person to make a movie with. Is to be honest, I
Yeah,
don't know what I'm doing. Just tell me where to stand.
no, that whole film was just like me running around being like, this is so dumb, like giddy about it. But like, we called it egg film the whole time and like thought it was so stupid all the way right up until finishing it. I remember finishing it and being like, this is like kind of fun to watch. Like
Oh, it's
maybe
great.
I
That's what
will
I
do
love
something
it.
with this. It was not intended to like be shown anywhere
Yeah,
or
so
like,
fun.
oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And like
Yeah,
it's fun in
so
like a different way from like a Portrait of God or Remains, where it's like actually scary. It's like it's goofy and fun. It's like a different side
yeah.
of the horror spectrum, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. I do like Rest though. Rest is the one I think that was also really small. But that was with my roommate now. So again, these are all very homegrown, but that one was more of like a passion project that we just did over a couple months and tried to
Mhm.
make look as good as we could. And I got to play with VFX a little more. So that was fun. But
Yeah.
that's an interesting list. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
Rest was one where it was the other day because I knew we were doing this and I was like, oh, I should probably watch some of the ones I haven't seen already, see if I can dig up some deep
Catching
cuts.
up. Those
And,
are deep
and then I watched the
cuts.
rest, and I was like, oh, ooh.
Well,
Like,
thanks.
man, he kind of cooked with this one.
No, I appreciate that. I do like watching that one still. I think
yeah,
it's kind of fun, but
yeah, it is fun. So talking more about the effects and everything like that, which we just talked about with Egg Film.
egg
Um,
film. Oh God.
were there any of your films aside from your earlier ones, because your earlier ones were, more developmental, but with your newer films, were there any times where you had a specific effect you wanted to achieve and you weren't able to,
Mhm.
you had to end up compromising? And what was that like?
Yes. Um, yeah. Yeah, actually, for Remains there were a couple. And there was one in Portrait of God. In Portrait of God, when he opens his mouth and the light emits, um, it was supposed to, and this would have been pretty different. This is the biggest thing that did not translate from the script because this is how it was written. Um, the light appears and the camera is supposed to push into the light until we pull away from it and it's the projector light. And like we end on that final shot pulling away from the projector light. So it was meant to be more clear that that projector light is what was in his mouth, or not is what was in his mouth, but the projector becomes what was in his mouth. And it just didn't look good. Like I tried to do it, but the light from the projector ended up being I had to like recreate it in post to make it actually look as like brilliant as it does in in the final result. So that just didn't work. So it ended up being that hard cut that it is. But that kind of works on its own, I think. So it's one of those things you just have to like keep an open mind and let it play in the edit. But for
I love the
Remains,
hard cut. I love the
thanks.
hard cut.
So that would, that could never have happened if it worked the
Yeah.
way it was supposed to. So happy accidents, but or not happy accidents, happy detours, I
Yeah.
suppose. But in Remains there was a lot more written with like the ash in the urn. Like the creature itself you're supposed to see is connected to the urn. Like you see him like particles attached to him that are coming up from the urn. Like when the hand comes out of the urn, it's kind of part of it's supposed to be like kind of disintegrating into ash.
Mhm.
Um, and all of that was just a matter of like I was working with a VFX guy, but it was a little bit more than the two of us together could. We bit off a little more than we could chew for what we were doing. Um, so yeah, we just had to simplify. It's a
Yeah.
bummer, but I don't know. Like the hard cut, in some ways it's probably better. Like even the best version of that would have a very different feel, a more whimsical feel, perhaps. So, or not whimsical, it's ash, but a little bit more of a, fantastical feel.
Ooh, the
So
whimsical, the baby in the urn.
the whimsical baby ash.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
So, talking about simplification, I mean, looking at all your BTS videos and stuff like that, right? Is you have very, and we talked about this earlier too, is you have it's very much like a skeleton crew kind of thing, where it's
Yeah.
really not a lot of people, cast or crew.
Hmm.
So I guess my question is like, what in post is done to give it that professional look? Because especially like with the lighting, like it has a very like, especially Remains. I was rewatching it last night to prepare for this, and I was like very struck by like the lighting of all things, which I'm usually
Hmm.
not. Usually lighting isn't something that I notice that much, but I'm like, this is really like well lit and everything. Like this looks like a professionally like done studio horror film.
Thanks.
Yeah. So like what is like how do?
I mean, I think a lot of it lighting is its own thing and definitely we focused on that but I think a lot of that look is owed to color grading in a way that you might not necessarily think until you look at it before it's graded but the lighting thing is kind of interesting because on Remains again that was supposed to be a different short. We had like a gaffer and grips and it was like we had a whole team that was going to be in charge of that but and a different DP. And when the project that it was supposed to be fell through, and we had to cancel and like reorganize, I ended up asking because there was no one available. I ended up asking just a friend to gaff who had never gaffed before to light the film, and so uh, a lot of it was just I don't know. I don't want to say luck. I mean, he did a good job for sure, but I think I think one of the things that helps is limiting light sources. Like originally with Remains, there were supposed to be lights on in the house because there's no lights on in the whole house. Um, and when you limit your light source to something like a very soft light coming in through this big window, it gives it this like cinematic feel that is noticeable versus trying to light it perfectly inside with a bunch of light sources and not being able to pull that off. Whereas if it's like this natural big light coming from outside, it looks more nice and natural. I don't know, it sounds silly, but and same with Portrait of God, where it's like just the one light source hitting her face, and then the one light source in the back. And that's pretty much it. If you limit those things, it can sometimes do wonders. Because we started Remains with this whole interior lighting setup that we had, and it looked really bad on monitor. Like we were about to roll the first shot, which was the wide shot of her at the table with the urn. And I was like, oh man, this looks bad. Like, what do we do? And someone turned off the lights inside for just a second, and it looked so much better. It looked so different, not what I had in mind, but it looked so much better. And and I told him to leave them off, and I was like, okay, I have to like make this decision now because every other shot is affected by this. And
Mhm.
I just told them to leave them off, and it made a big difference. So removing lights is often the key, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny with the stuff with the urn because we have a student film festival here, and we had someone did a movie about accidentally selling their mom's ashes.
Oh God, that's
So
awesome.
it's very funny. It was like it was a comedy. It was great. So shout out Alyssa. But yeah, it's very funny seeing like how one thing is able to do very
The
different,
two poles.
the two polar opposites of light and goofy. Ha ha, aren't we so silly? We
Yeah.
accidentally sold the ashes of our mother, and then hey, so what if the ashes were still alive? Uh,
Well, what's interesting, I do think uh ashes and urns are such like about what we were talking about earlier with like hooking people and like pitch decks and all that kind of thing. Uh Stories about those things are like immediately attention grabbing and immediately you know what significance that has to someone.
mhm,
So it makes sense that a lot of films, because I've seen a number of shorts that are about people transporting ashes, going to spread ashes,
mhm.
whatnot. And it just like works a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. So I remember this from your Portrait of God BTS. We're talking a lot about the movie that is not the new one. I mean, I
Oh,
apologize.
that's
Uh,
totally cool.
yeah. So, and you mentioned very, very briefly that you were like, oh, we had all this other backstory and stuff, but like, we'll, had to shelve it for time purposes. It would probably work better as a feature. Have you ever considered writing or actually working on a feature length film? And what would that, not like even a feature length version of one of your short films? I mean, it can be if, that's what
Mhm.
you think, but if you were to make a feature film, what do you think that would look like?
Uh, that is mostly what I'm working on now in terms of like trying to write feature stuff. What would it look like?
Or like compared to like your current films
Oh
or
yeah.
like set up
Yeah,
big
yeah.
monster,
Yeah, like what kind
the
of movies?
resolution whether or not it's good or bad, whatever. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
how would you take, or we can you can use an example. You can use Remains or Portrait of God. How would you hypothetically expand one of them into a feature with the five
I
seconds of prep time that I've given you?
No, yeah, yeah. I actually have written a draft of what Remains would look like as a feature just on my own. And that is interesting because it's one of those things where the short I think is quite aggressively bleak to the point where it's like, oh, this is a tough sell, like period, short or feature. So in terms of expanding it, it's like how can you take something like and to be frank, I think Remains is a pretty familiar like grief as a monster, grief as a metaphor story. And like I'm pretty wary of the amount of horror features that we've seen where the monster is symbolic or things like that. And those can be great, but it's like how can if I'm going to expand Remains in particular, then uh how can I make sure people feel it's fresh and unexpected and not too overwhelmingly bleak in a way that's like impenetrable. And so that feature still has a lot of the sensibilities of like a short, um, but I'm trying to make sure that it has like a sense of fun to it that you maybe wouldn't expect from that setup. Um, and I don't, I'm trying to think of what I should or shouldn't say as far as like what it's about, but
Don't spoil anything, 'cause in case
no,
this
I
actually
won't. I won't, but it's definitely
breaking Dylan Clark feature film out now.
out, yeah, out right now. And here's all the details. No,
Ever
but
now
it's
about Agent Argyle.
oh my God, please no. Yeah, so it's an Argyle-esque story. Who is in the urn?
Who
No,
is
it's
to
definitely
meet the real remains Ash baby.
oh God, it's cursed. Uh no, it's definitely like the short, but with more energy and fun and trying not to be exclusively grief as a metaphor.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how to answer it. It's a tricky answer,
No,
but
I know,
that's
and I gave you no prep time for this question at all. So
no, that's all right.
yeah,
But I've definitely been thinking about like a bunch of different future ideas. There's one in particular that's not based on anything that is all set. We've seen a lot of like contained films, like Saw is a little different, but like Saw, um, I saw recently Cube for the first time. Which have you seen Cube?
I saw Cube recently also. Yeah, good.
Yeah, good movie. But when you look at it as a filmmaker and you're like, oh my God, they shot this all in one set. And it feels like a big world because of the nature of the premise, or like it feels like a big setup. Like there's a bunch of rooms, but it's really just one room. And so I've been trying to write something where it's like that, where like it's
Yeah,
thinking about those limitations again, but mapping it out into a feature and like something I could maybe finance without the help of like someone, an angel investor or something.
yeah,
So yeah, definitely trying to have similar sensibilities to the shorts.
yeah.
But
Now, this is a bit of a silly question.
yeah,
So we know Jaws, right? You got the shark,
we
right?
know Jaws.
Everyone knows Jaws, right? So you probably knew this already because it's pretty common knowledge. But they named the shark, right?
Oh yes,
For filming purposes. They gave the shark's name is Bruce, for those of you who didn't know.
yes.
Do you name any of your demonic creatures while you're filming? Like, do any of them have like not canonical names, but do you just give any of them like little fun names?
Um, so there's a short I'm almost done with, and the thing in it, I mean, it's in the short though, so it's not really like a fun, like clever name. But no one, the people I've shown it to so far have been like, oh, the spooky thing. They haven't been like using its name, and the team that made it uses the name a lot, and like there have been some funny memes regarding it, just like within our little group chats. So
Yeah.
that's funny. Oh, yes, actually, Hatched. Hatched has one. The aliens, the like CG models look so stupid when they're not blurry. And so a friend of mine was like, "Oh my God, it looks like Howard the Alien." And we're like, "Okay, so they're all Howard the Aliens." That's the one. I'm trying to think of other ones. I guess we don't do it that much. In my head, yes, because they all look so funny on set. But
Again, the Portrait of God BTS, I was like, no way that's what it looked. No way this is what it looked like originally. I don't believe you.
yeah, yeah, and
BTS is
Remains
also
too.
edited.
Yeah, Remains was funny too. God, my buddy Will was Ash Baby, um, and he just looked absolutely insane
Yeah.
in a funny way. So
Yeah. So we mentioned it already, but what's next for you? What's your next project? If you're able to tell us anything
yeah,
about your upcoming projects.
sure, yeah. I have a short that's nearly done that I'll just put up on the channel. Sydney's in it again, similar crew to Portrait of God, like kind of the typical uh production wise and story
The gang.
wise. The gang, yeah, if you will. So hopefully that'll be up in the next uh month or two. I hate putting like dates on things 'cause I'm so
Oh
bad
yeah,
at
no,
committing. But we're close and it's very watchable already, which is good. But then the other thing is that short that I mentioned earlier, which was like a little bit bigger, and that is something that we're editing now, and I think we're gonna send to film festivals, and that might not be available to see for a bit because of that. But those are the two things, and then otherwise, like I said, just writing some longer stuff that will hopefully see the light of day. Uh, but we'll see. That's a bigger question mark. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I am very much looking forward to seeing stuff you do next.
thank
Uh
you.
what kind of advice do you have? I mean, obviously you've gotten very successful with, your films have done very well. What kind of advice do you have for younger filmmakers who are, trying to figure out what works and how to, get that captive audience that you have achieved?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely watch a lot of shorts. Same with watching a lot of features. But that's like, that's normal advice. Definitely watch a lot of shorts, read a lot of scripts, um, and keep it really small. I mean, like I said, most of the stuff I'm making is so small. In fact, most of the films I've made have screens. This is really specific, but a lot of them are one actors and then a screen, and that's their co-actor pretty much, or that's their co-star, or that's the thing that's delivering the scary things. Because you can control a lot what you see on the screen, and it can still be scary. I mean, even Portrait of God, it's just this big projector screen. So like, just think about how to squeeze, contain, make it as small as possible. Keep it simple for yourself in a way that will let you take those simple things and blow them out of proportions. Because no matter how small you try to make it, it's still going to be a really hard task to make it happen. You'll just be able to put more energy into that smaller thing. Um, yeah, I mean, it's tricky because it's easier for people to make things these days, but it's harder to stand out. And I think YouTube is a great place to put things, but film festivals are also great, so it's hard to know which to go with. Um, Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, but I think the smaller you keep it, the more achievable, the better.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then last question, we ask this of all our guests who come on the show. What are your favorite movies?
Oh boy. Oh, my favorite movies.
Pick
I'll say Blair Witch
pick
Project. That's
Blair Witch,
topical.
yeah. Pick two other
Um,
ones, two, three, top three.
I'll put another witch movie in there. I love The Witch more recently. And then I love The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. Those are my three horror. Okay, I'll put one more in. I love Pan's Labyrinth. Um, those are my four, probably.
Your four.
So I'm very curious what your four
My four. Oh boy. That's a whole other discussion. Let's just say Sharknado and Synecdoche, New
are.
York are in my top four.
That's
We got the
a
dichotomy.
man of taste.
We got the dichotomy.
That's incredible. The
Yeah.
range.
Yeah,
All
we're
right.
actually
All
we're,
right.
we're figuring out. We're actually trying to figure out talking to the Sharknado director,
No
actually
way.
get him on the show. Yeah, we're trying to figure out a time that works because he's got his own stuff going on.
Have
Not
you reached out?
Yeah, we've reached out. We've been
That's
chit-chatting,
awesome.
trying to figure out when works pretty much at this point. But yeah.
That's
Not
awesome.
not to hype you up, listeners, but that may be in the near future.
That hypes me up.
Hopefully.
That's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Dylan, for taking the
Yeah.
time to talk with us. Looking forward to seeing everything that you do. Do you have any where can people go if they want to find your stuff? Actually, we didn't even talk about that.
I mean, the main place is just my YouTube channel, which is my name, Dylan Clark, and it should pop up. It's a red logo. But yeah, that's where I post all my shorts. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you once again for joining us. It
thank
has been a
you.
pleasure. Um,
Likewise.
yeah, Movies to Midnight will be back next week. Um, unless you're listening to the recording back, in which case it doesn't matter. It's been out at this point. What are you doing and not listening to my show? But we will be back next week, same time, same place. Thank you very much for listening in. See ya.